Picture a machine that rolled hay into a perfect round bale in 1910, 6 decades before the world called that idea revolutionary. Or a baler so clever it single-handedly saved a company from bankruptcy in the middle of World War II. The history of hay is littered with inventions that were just too early, brilliant machines farmers weren't ready for, that rusted in barns while their ideas waited decades to be reborn. These are 10 forgotten hay balers that were way ahead of their time. Number 10. The New Holland Model 77 Hayliner, 1948. The machine that made one-man baling practical. When World War II ended, farms faced a new problem. Labor was scarce, wages were rising, and farmers desperately needed a way to harvest hay with fewer people. New Holland answered with a machine that would become one of the most influential small square balers ever built, the Model 77 Hayliner. Introduced in 1948, the Hayliner wasn't the first automatic pickup baler, but it perfected the concept. It combined reliable pickup, continuous compression, and dependable automatic twine knotters into a machine that farmers could actually trust day after day. Earlier balers had proven the idea. The Hayliner made it practical. Its biggest innovation was dependability. Hay equipment of the 1940s was notorious for broken knotters and constant adjustments, but the Hayliner earned a reputation for simply working. Farmers could hook it behind a modest tractor and spend long days producing uniform bales with minimal downtime. The machine also introduced thousands of smaller family farms to mechanized haymaking. What once required an entire crew with hay presses and wagons could now be done by just 1 or 2 people. That completely changed the economics of hay production. The success was enormous. Hayliners became one of New Holland's signature products, spawning an entire family of machines that dominated North American hayfields for decades. Even today, restored Model 77s still appear at antique tractor shows, and many continued working well into the 1990s. Modern square balers owe far more to the Hayliner than most people realize. It wasn't flashy. It simply became the blueprint everyone copied. Number 9. The John Deere Model 14T Baler, 1956. Some farm machines become legends, not because they were the first, but because they were nearly impossible to kill. That's exactly what happened with John Deere's Model 14T. Released in 1956, the 14T arrived when millions of farms were switching from loose hay to small square bales. John Deere designed it to be simple, durable, and easy to maintain. Instead of chasing complicated engineering, they built a baler that could survive decades of abuse. Its knotter system became famous for reliability. When properly adjusted, it tied bale after bale with remarkable consistency, something farmers valued more than almost anything else during hay season. The 14T also featured improvements to the feeding mechanism and plunger timing that reduced jams and produced more consistent bale density. Those may sound like small improvements, but during a long harvest, they saved countless hours of frustration. Production numbers reached into the tens of thousands, and the machine spread across North America. Even today, thousands remain operational. Walk through an antique tractor show, browse online farm auctions, or visit small farms across the Midwest, and chances are you'll still find a 14T quietly making hay. Its influence stretched well beyond its production run. Many of the engineering principles refined on the 14T carried into later John Deere balers that remained industry standards for decades. Sometimes the machines that change agriculture aren't the rare prototypes. They're the dependable workhorses that simply refuse to disappear. Number 8. The New Holland Automaton, Model 73. If Innes solved the knot, a shy old order Mennonite farmer named Ed Nolt solved everything else and saved a company doing it. Working in a shop near Farmersville, Pennsylvania, Edwin Nolt built a baler that did 2 things nobody had successfully combined before. It picked hay straight up off the field while moving, and it tied the finished bale automatically, all under compression. He cobbled the first one together from a hodgepodge of parts and figured out the fiendishly difficult trick of stopping the compression stroke, tying the bale while it was still under pressure, and moving on. Between 1937 and 1939, Nolt and a Kansas implement dealer named Arthur Young built and sold about 100 of these machines, christened the Automaton. In 1940, they sold the rights to the struggling New Holland Machine Company, and Nolt came along with the design. The timing was almost miraculous. New Holland launched the Model 73 in late 1940, and World War II was pulling men off the farms and into the armed forces. The Automaton used twine to tie a lighter 16 by 18-inch bale weighing 40 to 80 pounds, far lighter than the heavy wire-tied bales of the day. Suddenly, the women and kids left on the farm could actually handle the harvest. A machine that once needed a whole crew became something one family could run. New Holland built more than 20,000 of the Model 73 over the next 7 years. It didn't just make hay, it resurrected a nearly bankrupt company and turned New Holland into a giant of the industry. And Ed Nolt? He held 61 patents, but he filed them under the name a Lancaster County farmer because he genuinely didn't want the attention. One New Holland executive later put his invention right alongside the tractor and the three-point hitch as a true landmark of farm equipment. He may be the most important baler inventor almost nobody has heard of. Number 7. The Allis-Chalmers Roto-Baler, 1947. Remember Luebben selling his round baler rights to Allis-Chalmers in 1940? Here's what they did with them. In 1947, Allis-Chalmers put the Roto-Baler on the market, and it became the first round baler ever mass-produced. It took Luebben's rolling concept and turned it into a real, viable, tractor-drawn field machine that picked up a windrow and wound it into a compact, cylindrical bale wrapped in twine. The numbers tell you how hungry farmers were for it. Within 3 years, Allis-Chalmers sold around 23,000 Roto-Balers. Those neat little round bales had the same water-shedding advantage Omo had spotted decades earlier. The curved, rolled surface let rain run off, so they held up better in the field and in the stack. So why is this ahead of its time if it actually sold well? Because the world wasn't ready to commit to the round bale yet. Through the 1950s and 60s, the small square bale, light, stackable, easy to throw on a wagon, became king, and the Roto-Baler's small round bales fell out of fashion. The round bale revolution everyone knows today, with those giant round bales dotting the countryside, didn't arrive until the 1970s. There's a second reason collectors remember the Roto-Baler with a mix of awe and dread. It is a mechanical labyrinth. Owners describe it as one of the most complicated farm machines ever built, a jungle of springs, latches, chains, and bearings that all had to work in perfect harmony. It was almost too sophisticated for its own era. The Roto-Baler was a round baler born in a square bale world. It proved the idea could be manufactured and sold at scale, and then it patiently waited about 25 years for the rest of agriculture to catch up to what Nebraska farmers had dreamed up back in the 1890s. Number 6. The New Holland Self-Propelled Baler. Today, self-propelled is a premium feature. You can buy self-propelled windrowers, choppers, and even round balers. But New Holland was building self-propelled balers back in the Eisenhower era, and almost nobody remembers them. From 1956 all the way to 1984, New Holland produced a series of self-propelled pickup balers, 7 distinct models in total. Instead of trailing behind a tractor, the baler had its own engine and driver's seat and drove itself across the field, picking up the windrow and tying bales as it went. On the big western hay operations where fields stretched to the horizon, cutting out the tractor and running one integrated machine made real sense. Take the Model 1281, built in 1965. New Holland made just 430 of them over 3 years, aimed squarely at those expanding large-scale hay operations out west. It carried a 172 cubic inch Ford industrial engine, the same basic engine family used in Ford tractors, and its list price in 1965 was $7,235. That machine was loaded with features we'd consider modern: a super sweep pickup that raised and lowered hydraulically, an automatic bale tension system, and top-mounted knotters. The earliest self-propelled model, the 166, made a 14 by 18 inch bale, while the later models bumped up to 16 by 18. Because those bigger bales were heavy to wrestle by hand, many of these self-propelled balers were paired with accumulators or automatic bale wagons, but more on those in a second. These machines were rare, expensive, and specialized, and the market ultimately went a different direction, back to simpler pull-type balers behind ever bigger tractors. So the self-propelled baler quietly disappeared into collector barns. But the concept was dead on. 60 years later, self-propelled hay machinery is a booming category, and restored self-propelled New Hollands now sell at auction for more than they cost new. Ahead of their time and finally appreciated. Number 5. The New Holland Automatic Bale Wagon. Here's a machine that solved a problem the baler itself created. Once automatic balers were spitting out thousands of small square bales. Somebody still had to walk the field, pick up every single one, throw it on a wagon, haul it in, and stack it. It was brutal, back-breaking labor. So New Holland built a machine to erase that job entirely. The Automatic Bale Wagon. The concept, developed through the mid-20th century, was genuinely radical. The wagon drove along. Its pickup swept bales off the ground, and a series of tables and rollers automatically arranged them, laying them in tiers, building a complete, tightly organized load with no human touching a single bale. Then, at the stack yard, the whole wagon would tilt and slide the entire load off in one clean, self-supporting stack. Some models could even unload one bale at a time onto an elevator to feed a hayloft. Pull-type versions like the Stackliner led to fully self-propelled versions, the Stack Cruiser, that could carry well over 100 bales at a time and unload them without a soul lifting a finger. This was hands-free hay handling decades before automation was a buzzword, and the idea only got smarter. Modern self-propelled bale wagons run on serious horsepower with a comfortable cab, and their control systems can store dozens of pre-programmed stacking patterns. The operator just picks the pattern and the machine builds it. That's essentially field robotics, tracing its lineage back to a mid-century machine most people have never heard of. Bale wagons never became universal. They excel in big, dry climate hay country and are less common elsewhere, which is exactly why they're forgotten to most people. But anyone who ever spent a July afternoon bucking bales by hand will tell you a machine that stacks hay by itself was, and still is, pure genius. Number 4. The Buchele-Haverdink Whale of a bale. Now we get to the machine that quietly fathered the modern countryside, and it was born in a college lab. In 1965, a graduate student at Iowa State University named Buchele-Haverdink went looking for a master's thesis topic. He approached Wesley F. Buchele, a professor of agricultural engineering, and together they set out to tackle one of farming's oldest miseries, the crushing labor of moving hay. Over the next year, they designed and built something no farmer had ever seen, a baler that produced a genuinely enormous round bale. Completed and tested in 1966, the Buchele-Haverdink bale measured about 5 feet across and 6.5 feet long, and after it dried, it weighed roughly 600 pounds. They nicknamed it the Whale of a Bale. The whole point was liberation from lifting. Instead of hundreds of little bales that had to be carried by hand, you'd have one gigantic bale you could simply move and feed with a tractor. Iowa State proudly notes that this invention saved farmers from the back-breaking chore of slinging hay bales, a professor and a handful of student researchers reshaping an entire industry from a university workshop. Here's the ahead of its time part. This was a research prototype, not a product. The team had cracked the concept of the big round bale, but turning that into a rugged, reliable, mass-produced machine was another challenge entirely. That final leap would be taken by an Iowa manufacturer named Gary Vermeer, whose company introduced its big round baler in 1971. The machine usually credited with launching the round bale era we live in now, but the seed was planted at Iowa State. Every colossal round bale you drive past today, every field dotted with those giant hay wheels traces back through Vermeer to 2 men in an ag engineering lab in 1966, chasing a whale of a bale. Number 3. The Field Hay Cuber. What if the future of hay wasn't a bale at all, but a cube? In the mid-1960s, engineers developed one of the most futuristic hay-making machines ever built, the Field Hay Cuber. Instead of rolling or pressing hay into a big bale, the cuber picked up windrowed hay, usually premium alfalfa, and compressed it under tremendous force into small, dense, uniform cubes, roughly bite-sized blocks you could literally shovel like coal. The clever part is what held those cubes together. Almost nothing artificial. The intense pressure and the heat of compression, plus a little added water, activated the hay's own natural lignin, the plant's built-in glue, to bind each cube. No twine, no wire, no net wrap. Just concentrated, easy to handle, easy to transport feed. For shipping hay long distances or metering out precise rations, cubes were spectacularly efficient, a genuinely different vision of what packaged hay could be. So why don't we all feed cubes today? Two big reasons. First, cubers were monsters to run. Early machines like the John Deere 400 and 425 were famously power-hungry, some carrying a Detroit 6V71 diesel pushing well over 200 horsepower, which meant a lot of noise, a lot of fuel, and demanding maintenance. Second, cubing is picky about conditions. You need clean, high-quality alfalfa at just the right moisture. Weedy or grassy hay simply won't stick together, and damp climates make consistent cubing nearly impossible. That's why field cubing largely stayed a niche of the dry, sunny West and never swept the country the way balers did. To a lot of farmers, cubers vanished like the dinosaurs, but the idea was visionary. Dense, uniform, machine-flowable, additive-free feed produced right in the field. In an era obsessed with efficiency and logistics, the humble hay cube looks less like a dead end and more like a concept that was simply waiting for its moment. Number 2. The Hesston StakHand. By 1970, everyone assumed the future of hay was bales. Hesston, out of Hesston, Kansas, made a bold bet in the opposite direction, and for a while, they were absolutely right. Their machine was the StakHand, and its philosophy was almost rebellious. Forget the twine, the wire, the needles, the knotters, all the finicky, breakable bits of a baler. The StakHand had a wide pickup with spinning paddles that created a vacuum, sucking loose hay out of the windrow and blowing it up into a big box on wheels. Every so often, a hydraulic roof pressed down to compress the load. When the box was full, a chain conveyor pushed out a complete self-supporting loaf, a compact loose stack, shaped to shed rain. The productivity was startling. The StakHand came in a 1-ton Model 10, 3-ton Model 30, and 6-ton Model 60 capacity, and a good operator could put up 80 tons of hay a day. Some folks were building 6-ton stacks while rolling through the field at 12 miles an hour. Crucially, it turned haymaking into a one-person job at a time when farm labor and fuel costs were both squeezing farmers hard. There was even an agronomic edge. Because a loose stack doesn't compress as tightly as a bale, it breathes. So you could stack hay at higher moisture, around 23%, without the mold risk you'd face with a tight round or square bale. And a thick thatch of hay on top acted like a roof, keeping the inside dry. The StakHand made Hesston a haymaking powerhouse. By the mid-1970s, the company was the nation's top hay equipment maker. Hesston built a whole ecosystem around it. The stack mover to haul the stacks, and the stack feeder to feed them out. Then the Big Round Baler arrived and did a similar job with tidier, more transportable results, and the stack wagon faded. The last 60B rolled out in 1985. But out on ranches in Nevada and the High Plains, StakHands are still quietly working today, a forgotten machine that never entirely quit. Number 1. The Hesston 4800 Big Square Baler. Our number 1 didn't disappear. It disappeared into the background, so completely woven into modern agriculture that almost nobody remembers it was ever a wild, unproven idea. But when Hesston introduced the Model 4800 in 1978, it was the first large square baler in the world, and it changed everything. The round baler had already conquered the pasture. But round bales have a stubborn flaw. They don't stack neatly, they waste space on a truck, and they roll. What commercial hay growers, dairies, and exporters really wanted was a huge bale that packed together like a brick. The problem was, nobody knew if you could compress a bale that big without it rotting from the inside. The origin story is fantastic. A Hesston engineer named Alan White built a giant bale chamber in the engineering lab and packed it by hand with hay. And when that first hand-stuffed 4-foot by 4-foot bale didn't heat up or spoil, they knew they were onto something. Early prototypes tried feeding hay in from the side and it just wouldn't work. So in 1975, they switched to feeding hay up into the bottom of the chamber. the bottom feed design that defines these machines to this day. By 1978, after relentless field testing, the perfected Model 4800 was ready, and Hesston built 28 of them, including units shipped off to demonstrate in Australia and Europe. That first machine produced 4x4-foot bales, and the Hesston-designed double knotter it debuted with is so good it's still in use in their balers decades later. Big Square Bales became the preferred choice of dairies, feedlots and long-distance hay exporters, dense, stackable, transportable and machine-friendly. How far ahead was it? In 2013, Hesston built its 25,000th large square baler, an entire global hay export industry. The reason hay grown in the American West feeds animals in the Middle East and Asia rests on that boxy 1978 machine that started as a giant bale chamber packed by hand in a Kansas lab. If you enjoyed this trip through forgotten farm iron, let me know down in the comments which of these machines surprised you the most. And if you've ever run one of these old balers yourself, we want to hear that story. Hit subscribe for more forgotten machines that were way ahead of their time, and I'll see you in the next one.